They said I was too old, too tired, too rigid, that I couldn't keep up with a 10-year-old girl anymore. The courtroom smelled like cheap carpet and sweat. I sat there while 3 lawyers I'd never met told a judge that I was no longer a viable guardian. They called me unfit, called her mother, the one who abandoned her for 8 years, reformed. And the judge nodded like he already made up his mind. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching from. My name is Frank Delaney. I'm 66 years old, and for the past 6 years, I've raised my granddaughter, Lena, alone. I was there when she had night terrors and nosebleeds. I was there when she missed her dad, my son, so much it made her physically sick. Her mother? She showed up last fall, wearing a suit that cost more than my truck, wearing perfume strong enough to hide the stench of the years she missed. With her came a new husband, a man with too much confidence and not enough eyes, and behind them a lawyer from some boutique firm in Houston. They didn't come to visit. They came to take. Frank, we just want what's best for Lena. That's what she said the first time. As if I wasn't. They claimed my home was outdated, that I didn't provide adequate educational opportunities, that Lena deserved stability. I asked, where were you when she needed a doctor at 2 a.m.? Where were you when she cried herself hoarse because her dad never came home from the highway? Where were you when I taught her to ride a bike using a busted parking lot behind the church? They had no answers. Just paperwork. And money. The judge ruled in their favor. Said we'd have a transitional custody phase. That phrase still makes my blood burn. They took her that night. Lena didn't cry, didn't scream. She just hugged me like it might be the last time. It's okay, Grandpa, she whispered. I know what they are. That line stuck in my chest like a nail. Because she saw it too. The charm, the smiles, the rehearsed warmth. But I knew better. They didn't want to raise her. They wanted to own her. They wanted to show her off like a trophy in their new glass house, proof of how redeemed they were. I went home alone. The house was still warm from the biscuits I baked that morning. Her little jacket was still hanging by the door. I sat in the kitchen for hours, staring at the photo of her with her father, my son, taken the year before he died. They said I was unfit. Unfit. That word echoed until it became a beat. A rhythm. A war drum. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened the old filing cabinet in the garage, the one with every document, every record, every piece of paper I swore I'd never use. Not unless they came for her. Well, they did. And now, they're about to learn something very important about old men. We don't explode. We collapse inward. Then we rebuild into something they can't recognize. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat on the back porch with my thermos of black coffee, watching the wind move through the trees like it was carrying messages I couldn't quite hear. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was surgical, because something was already happening inside me. A reshaping. Not rage. Focus. They'd taken Lena by law, but I still had something more powerful than any court order: time, memory, and everything they tried to hide. I spent the next morning going through the box. I hadn't touched it in years. The one marked emergency only. Inside were manila folders filled with the things that never made it into custody court because I never wanted to use them. Because I believed people could change. Not anymore. I pulled out the first file, Kayla's rehab records. For stints. 2 states. One involving methadone she wasn't prescribed. The last one sealed due to minor exposure. Lena was 2 at the time. I had a copy of that report. They thought it was buried. Second file, her husband. Andrew. Brand new name in our lives, but not new to state systems. 3 DUIs under a sealed deal in Louisiana. Domestic complaint in 2018, never filed formally, but I had a notarized affidavit from the neighbor who called it in. They thought I didn't know where to look. They thought I didn't have the energy. They forgot. I raised a child in the age of paper. And I keep everything. That week I watched. Didn't act. Didn't talk. I watched their house from the road, behind tinted windows. Nice place. Gated. Lots of glass. The kind of place that looks clean because it has nowhere to hide the filth. I saw Lena twice. Once in the driveway, pale, quiet, eyes dull. Second time on the balcony, staring out like she was counting how far away I was. I kept my distance, because now wasn't the time to rescue. It was the time to document. I made 4 stops that week. 1. To the county assessor's office, pulled property records on their new home. 2. To the clerk's office, checked marriage and name changes. 3. To an old contact in CPS who owed me a favor from 2015. 4. And to a retired PI I once fixed a roof for in exchange for plumbing work. Each visit gave me a new thread. Unfiled reports. Suspicious financial transfers. Names of people who had questions but never voiced them. And the more I pulled, the more I realized this wasn't just about custody. This was about image. They were building a narrative, perfect couple, reclaimed motherhood, stability. Lena was the final piece of the puzzle. A child equals redemption, unless someone breaks the picture frame. A week later, I got a call. Lena's school. The private one, they rushed her into to prove she was in better hands. The nurse noticed bruising. Small round. Like fingertip pressure. Lena said she fell. The nurse wasn't convinced. But they let it go. Because they always do. I didn't. I drove home in silence, hands clenched so tight around the steering wheel I thought the plastic might crack. I didn't call them. Didn't confront them. Because I wasn't done yet. When I make my move, it won't be words. It'll be evidence. Exposure. And silence. And when the courts see what I've collected and what they missed, I won't ask for her back. I'll make them beg me to take her. I didn't break anything. Didn't scream. Didn't drink. Didn't even curse. When I saw the photo, Alora's copy the school nurse quietly slid into the file. I just nodded once. It wasn't a fall. It was a hand. Small bruise, upper arm. Too high for a playground bump. Too focused to be an accident. Lena wouldn't lie to protect herself. She'd lie to protect them. That's how kids work. I raised her long enough to know the difference between clumsy and scared. So I got to work. I started building a package. Not a report. A case. First, I gathered everything I had on Kayla, my former daughter-in-law. Rehab logs, sealed court appearances, restraining order filed by her own mother back in 2011. Most of it was suppressed, sealed, or never entered into evidence. But I had physical copies. Scanned, labeled, printed again, 3 times, in case one set mysteriously disappeared. Next, I opened the file on Andrew, her perfect suburban husband. Found the name of the woman who filed that domestic complaint in Shreveport. Dug through Facebook, found her new last name, messaged her from a burner account. Told her the truth. You don't know me, but my granddaughter might be in the same position you escaped. She responded within an hour. And she had screenshots, texts, photos, one voice memo. It was enough to raise the dead. Then came the financial side. Andrew had recently opened a youth foundation, nonprofit, tax-sheltered, set up 6 months after marrying Kayla. The kicker? It was in Lena's name. Her face on the website. Her name on donation receipts. They were using her for marketing. For sympathy. For credibility. That was it. That was the pressure point. I printed everything. Labeled it Exhibit C. I had a contact in the media, small-town reporter named Tina Vargas, who once ran a story on my son's trucking accident. She remembered me. I didn't give her the whole story. Just enough. They took a child from her only stable guardian, and now they're using her to fundraise. Want to know more? She did. Badly. The next morning, I mailed 3 full packets. 1 to Child Protective Services. 1 to the family court that gave them custody. And 1 to Tina with a note. If this ends up in the shredder, you'll know it was never about justice. It was about money. Then I sat back and waited. Not long. On Tuesday, the call came. Blocked number. Heavy voice on the other end. It was Andrew. You made a big mistake, old man. Not yet, I said. But you will. He hung up. But the panic in his tone? That was real. Because people like him know how to pressure the weak, threaten the poor, outspend the honest. But they don't know what to do when the person on the other side isn't afraid to lose. Because I'd already lost everything. And now I had nothing left to protect. Except her. That night, I parked across the street from their house again. The lights were on. Movement in the kitchen. I watched Lena's shadow cross the living room, slower than usual. Like her body was heavy. I whispered, even though she couldn't hear me, "I'm coming, kid. Just hold on a little longer." Because soon, the courts wouldn't have a choice. The narrative was breaking. And the perfect couple? They were about to have a very public fall. By Thursday morning, the air had changed. The kind of change you don't feel on your skin, you feel it in how people look at you. Or stop looking. The woman at the post office gave me a different kind of smile. Pity. Respect. Maybe both. At the grocery store, a man I didn't know nodded at me like he knew exactly who I was. That reporter, Tina Vargas, had published her article. Front page of the local Gazette. Bold black headline, "Custody for sale? Community raises questions after family court ruling." She didn't use Lena's name. Didn't use mine. But Kayla and Andrew? She printed everything I gave her. And a few things I didn't. Turns out, Tina had dug deeper on her own. Andrew's foundation had been flagged 3 times for improper tax filings. He never responded. He thought no one was looking. But now, everyone was. By noon, CPS had reopened the file. An investigator called me. Her voice was professional, steady, but you could hear the undertone, that low-frequency unease of someone who knows they may have missed something big. "Mr. Delaney, we'd like to schedule a follow-up regarding Lena's well-being." I agreed. "But not at my house." "Let's meet at the school," I said. Neutral ground. And I added, "You bring a notepad. I'll bring the rest." The school nurse was waiting when we got there. She wasn't surprised. She handed over her own copies of reports from the past 2 months, missed assignments, sudden mood shifts, stomach aches, a whispered confession Lena had made last week. "I don't want to go home. They don't like when I talk too much." The CPS agent just nodded, writing everything down like her pen was suddenly heavier. I handed over my documents. Every page, every timestamp, every record they never saw during the custody trial because no one cared enough to look. Not until now. "This is enough to warrant emergency review," the agent finally said. "I'll be submitting a recommendation for temporary removal." I didn't smile, didn't breathe relief. I just asked, "When?" She checked her watch. "Tonight." That evening, I didn't go to their house. I didn't have to. The state did it for me. 2 cars. 2 agents. 1 officer, just in case. I waited across the street in my truck. Engine off. Window cracked. And when they opened the door, I saw her. Lena. Backpack on. Arms folded. Chin high. Like she already knew she was going home. She didn't cry. She didn't look back. She just stepped into the car like a soldier reporting for duty. Don't forget to like this video and write in the comments where you're watching from. They brought her to the district office. She was quiet. Calm. When I arrived, she saw me through the glass window and ran. No words. No questions. Just a hug that made time stop. Her voice was small. "I knew you'd come." I knelt down eye to eye and said the only thing that mattered: "You're never going back there." The court hearing was set for the following week. But I already knew the outcome. They weren't going to fight it. Because now they had cameras outside their door. Because now the world was watching. Because now I wasn't alone. But it wasn't over. Because while Lena was home, safe, wrapped in my arms that night, they still had lawyers. Still had money. Still had narratives to sell. And the system? It still favored those who smiled while stabbing. So I sat at the table that night, Lena finally asleep in her room again, and stared at the one folder I hadn't opened yet. The one with the name of the judge who gave them custody in the first place. Because the deeper I looked, the more I saw this wasn't just a family failure. It was a machine. And I was going to take it apart. By the time Lena fell asleep in her old room, holding that same tattered rabbit plush she'd had since she was 4, I already knew I wasn't done. I had her back. But keeping her safe? That was a different battle entirely. Because monsters like Kayla and Andrew don't stop just because the tide turns. They regroup. They lie. They sue. And when they have money, they call judges by their first names. So I went back to the folder. The one labeled J. Tanner. Family court judge. Late 50s. Clean suits, clean record, clean image. Too clean. That custody decision? The one that took Lena away from me in the first place? Didn't make sense. Not by the evidence. Not by the law. But it did, if someone was nudged. I started with campaign donations. Judges aren't supposed to be bought, but elected officials sure know how to get help. And in 2020, Judge Tanner's re-election committee received a $10,000 contribution from a shell pack tied to the very firm that represented Kayla. I traced it back through 4 different addresses. 2 of them dead ends. The third? A mailbox registered to Andrew's name. Sloppy. I wasn't just dealing with bad parents anymore. I was dealing with a closed circle. A lawyer. A donor. A decision. And my granddaughter caught in the middle of it. I made one more stop that week. Tina Vargas. I brought her everything. The money trail. The fake pack. Even an audio recording I captured from a courthouse hallway, Andrew bragging into a phone, "Relax. We've got Tanner. That old man's done." She didn't blink. She just leaned forward. "Do you want to burn them now or let them squirm first?" I looked her dead in the eye. Both. The next article hit harder than the first. Is justice for sale? Donation scandal emerges in family court system. No names again. Just enough smoke to draw fire. And fire came fast. An ethics board opened a review. The judge was placed on administrative leave. And the firm representing Kayla went silent. It wasn't just a custody case anymore. It was a storm. Andrew tried to call me. Twice. I let it ring. Kayla sent an email through a burner account. "We never wanted this to get ugly. Let's talk." I replied with one line. "You made it ugly the moment you put a bruise on her arm." That weekend, Lena and I planted tomatoes in the backyard. Just like we used to. Her laugh was different now. Quieter. Hesitant. But real. And as she dug her hands into the soil, she looked up at me and asked, "Is it really over?" I didn't lie. Not yet. But it will be. I promise. Because there was still one last piece on the board. Not Andrew. Not Kayla. Not even the judge. It was the system itself. The one that saw an old man and assumed he'd roll over. The one that let money speak louder than history. The one that said, "He's had his time." Well, now it was my time. And I wasn't going to waste a second of it. Some men go to war with weapons. I went with binders. Color-coded. Dated. Indexed. By Monday morning, I had enough evidence to choke a courthouse clerk and enough quiet support to make sure it wouldn't disappear this time. Because once the judge went on leave and the firm backed down, the people who used to pretend they didn't hear me, now they were listening. Especially when the state attorney general's office got involved. I was asked to testify. Not in court, not yet, but behind closed doors. Official inquiry. They thought I'd meet a lawyer. I told them I didn't need someone to speak for me. I'd been silent long enough. They recorded the session. I spoke slow, steady, and left no detail out. From the bruises on Lena's arms, to the fake foundation using her face, to the donation funnel through Andrew's shell pack, to the way Judge Tanner ignored sealed warnings about Kayla's past. It wasn't just a story. It was a map of corruption, and I had drawn every inch of it. That week, the court reversed the original custody order. Unanimously, Lena was placed under permanent guardianship with me. Kayla and Andrew lost all visitation. No appeal allowed. The judge's resignation followed 3 days later. Quiet. No press conference. Just a disappearing act in a cheap gray suit. Tina ran one final story, one grandfather's fight, how a broken system was exposed by the man it tried to silence. She asked if she could name me now. I said yes, because there's no shame in surviving, and no shame in fighting when no one else would. The morning after the article went live, a man in a truck stopped in front of my house. He got out, didn't say a word, just handed me an envelope. Inside, a handwritten letter from one of the other grandfathers. They tried to take my grandson, too. I didn't know how to fight them, but now I do. That's when I realized this wasn't just about Lena. It never was. It was about all of us they tried to erase. The older ones. The quiet ones. The ones who know things no spreadsheet ever could. They built a system on forgetting men like me. and I made damn sure they'd never forget me again. 2 parts left, and one last truth still buried. Lena was safe. The system had cracked. The judge was gone. But the victory felt hollow, because I still hadn't answered one question. Why did they want her so badly in the first place? Was it guilt? Control? A story to sell to friends? Or was it something worse? I started reviewing the files again. Not mine. Theirs. The donation trail. The school enrollment timing. The nonprofit launch. One detail kept poking me in the chest. The foundation was registered 2 months before Kayla even contacted me. Before the custody hearing. Before the "we just want to reconnect" speeches. They never came for Lena out of love. They came because she was useful. I called my contact at CPS, the one who'd flagged Andrew's youth program paperwork. She hesitated, then said, "There's something I didn't mention before. One of their donors. It's not a charity. It's a pharmaceutical firm." That stopped me cold. Why would a drug company be funding a fake youth foundation? That's what we're trying to figure out. She sent me a name, Zorumt Pharmaceuticals. I dug deep and found a pilot program they were testing, a behavioral therapy initiative on children of at-risk households. Kayla had signed Lena up, without my knowledge, without Lena's consent. And Lena had been dosed, twice, with a mood-regulating supplement under the guise of a school-based nutrition program. She never knew, and neither did I. I stood up so fast my chair fell backward. My hands shook, but not from rage, from calculation. They didn't just take her. They used her. For profit. For experiments. And covered it in charity smiles. This wasn't a custody battle. This was medical exploitation. I packaged everything. Every lab report. Every donor receipt. Tina wasn't just ready. She was furious. Her headline this time, Chemical Custody, How One Child Became a Test Subject in a Courtroom Scheme. It didn't take long. State Health Department launched a criminal investigation. Zorum stock tanked 18% in 48 hours. Kayla and Andrew were subpoenaed. I watched the footage on the news. Them walking into court, sunglasses on, heads down. This time, no smirks. No lawyers spinning tales. Just shame. Lena didn't need to know everything. Not yet. But she did ask, "Why don't they call me anymore?" I paused, then said, "Because people who lie eventually get so tangled up, they can't speak at all." She nodded like she understood more than she let on, then went back to her coloring book. That night, I took the last folder out of the cabinet. The one marked Dad. My son, Lena's father. He died on that highway because of a shipping schedule that got pushed by a company desperate to make a quarterly target. Guess who one of their biggest investors was? Zorumt. And guess who signed the insurance waiver when he applied for that job? Andrew. Back when he worked in logistics. It all came full circle. They didn't just try to erase me. They erased him too. And I was the last man standing. I stood outside the courthouse, watching the wind scatter dried leaves across the stone steps. Lena was safe. The firm was exposed. The foundation was dismantled. But one question still hummed in the back of my mind. What do you do when your war ends and you're still standing? Zorumt collapsed within 2 months. SEC froze their assets. Federal subpoenas flew like confetti. Kayla and Andrew were indicted. Charges included fraud, child endangerment, medical consent violations. They took plea deals. Avoided prison. But their reputations? Gone. They moved out of state. Vanished. I don't expect they'll ever try to contact Lena again. And if they do, I'll be waiting. The state issued an apology. Personal letter from the governor's office, recognizing the failure of oversight and the role I played in exposing it. I didn't frame it, didn't hang it. I pinned it to the inside of my cabinet, right where the emergency folder used to be. A placeholder for something I'd never have to open again. One evening, I found Lena sitting on the porch. She wasn't reading, just thinking. "Grandpa," she said, "why did they do all that? Why us?" I sat beside her, careful with my knees. Because they thought no one would stop them. She nodded. Then she asked, "Why didn't you give up?" I looked at her, really looked at her. Because when someone tries to erase you, the worst thing you can do is disappear. She smiled, and for the first time since this all began, I saw peace settle into her face. I never planned to be a fighter. I was a builder, a father, a man who fixed roofs and changed oil and watched the sun rise with a thermos of black coffee. But when the storm came, I didn't run. I documented. I waited. I struck. They thought I'd fold. They thought I was just another tired old man. What they didn't realize was, tired men don't quit. They endure. And then they outlive the empire that tried to bury them.